Hey, peeps, you have entered the Unstuck Yourself with Crystal Simmons podcast, where I have intentional conversations that raises your awareness, which releases your innate abilities and leads you to purposeful action. You know there's more to life and you're worthy of it, and yet you feel stuck. This is your sign. Unstuck yourself with me, Crystal Simmons, certified coach, corporate facilitator, and dope human being. I'll be here every week. Will you? Hey, dope peeps, welcome back. Before we jump into today's special interview episode, let's recap last week's episode that you listened to and enjoyed, titled Putting No into Action by Raising Our Awareness. 3 double CPs. The first one was, how often do we actually say no? Number 2 was perks of a no. And number 3, putting that no into action. So much went into the episode. So make sure you listen back if you haven't already, especially if you're finding you ain't got time for anything and you don't know why. Let's raise that awareness and implementing no with accessories, the razzle dazzle. You'll know more once you listen to the episode. But we did discuss accessorizing your no, not apologizing for your no's, and practicing your no in real time with me. Let's jump into today's episode with James Harris, who is the founder of Men to Heal. He is a licensed mental health professional and holds a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. James is a TEDx talk speaker as well as an international speaker on topics of mental health, entrepreneurship, DEI, and much more. At the age of 5, James lost his father. At the age of 8, his mother began to have strokes and epilepsy, and he and his siblings became wards of the state. They were placed in the Virginia foster care system. As a ward of the state, he was required to attend weekly counseling sessions. However, he found those sessions unengaging. Typically run by older white male therapists who sat on a couch, James felt that they could not relate to the emotional and cultural issues that he faced. As a result, counseling wasn't a service he took seriously, and so he wasn't able to benefit from it. This unfulfilling experience followed James into his adult life. James deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan. Upon his return, he again tried therapy, and the experience was the same. First off, shout out to James for running that shit back. To James, this was a reason why most veterans attend the group sessions as opposed to individual sessions. In 2018, James created Men to Heal, a movement to bring awareness to the stigma surrounding mental health among boys, men, and underserved populations. Now, as an Army veteran, serial entrepreneur, and community advocate, James has had a host of investments and the opening of the Healing Hub in 2019, which is a wellness center that offers outpatient therapy, yoga, mindfulness, and financial resources to the community. James also brings in different speakers to discuss, but is not limited to, financial literacy, first-time home buying, restoration of rights, voter registration, and LGBTQIA, just to name a few. The Healing Hub is also able to feed and clothe the less fortunate every 3rd Saturday of the month. James also created a board game called Cheesy Dates to increase communication with people and couples. And the board game allows people to choose date ideas and strengthen their communication in their relationships, whether they're intimate or platonic. And each listener who is listening to this episode and at the sound of my voice, if the cheesy date idea kind of perked your interest, because it did mine. I actually purchased one for myself. My husband and I played it, and it allows you to literally just play a game, not even think about it. You literally rip open the box, put down the board. You have 4 pawn pieces. You have 2 dice. You roll them. You roll a 7, you get out of the little corner, and then the game begins, but it's interactive where you pick a card, and it'll either be a question card that if you land on that little block, and it has so many thought-provoking and connecting building questions for you to really just sit and talk. Like, you could play the game all the way to the end, or you could really just get a dope conversation out with your significant other or your homie or your bestie. I'm looking forward to actually playing this with Sierra and Elise when we go to our Loving Me Through retreat that we'll be going to the first weekend in March together. So I'll be able to give you more feedback. But if you are interested in playing the game, make sure you head over to my Instagram page, Crystal Clear Purposes, where I'm going to have a very easy to get done type of raffle. All you got to do is 1, 2, 3. 1, you'll like the post. 2, you'll share your most loved Unstuck Yourself with Crystal Simmons podcast episode. You can share it in your stories and just tag at Crystal Clear Purposes in your share. You'll be entered in. I'm going to pull a name and I get to deliver. If you're too far, then I'll just ship it to you. But you will have the chance to have the board game that this amazing human being created called Cheesy Dates. So if you're interested, make sure you head over to Instagram, Crystal Clear Purposes, and I'll have a post for you to be entered in. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome you to the experience of James Harris and myself conversing about therapy. Enjoy, peeps. Hello, peeps. It's Crystal again with the Unstuck Yourself with Crystal Simmons podcast. Here we highlight personal stuck moments of mine, but also I have space for others to share their personal stuck moments, experiences as well. And today we get to chat with James. And James, before we dive into all the dopeness that you have created, you continue to create, first, I want you to let the peeps know about little James that paved the way for the current James that's before me today.
Little James that paved the way for the current? That's a tough question. Yeah, I don't know. It was very difficult growing up. So I guess that tenacity has strengthened me now where I am in my journey. So I definitely appreciate those early tough beginnings.
And it's I think you are one of the first to say that that's a tough question. So what made it tough for you to answer that?
Just trying to put the words together to figure out which direction I want to go, I mean, I guess it wasn't tough to other people, just based on how they were raised probably or the environment in which they came from. But for me, it was difficult trying to navigate which way to go with that question.
A lot of people have asked me, because I told them I would be speaking with you about being you and being dope and being a therapist, Black male. And I asked many Black males who have gone to therapy and those who haven't, what are some questions? And the number one question they asked was, how did you get started?
How did I get started in therapy as a therapist, or which?
Yeah, how did you become a therapist? So you can go all the way back to little James. You can go to school, where you what school you chose, why, wherever you want to take it.
So I guess I'll start from, excuse me.
James just busted out a yawn, y'all. He just yawned in my face.
Yeah, no, because I'm trying to. All right, so the easiest. Let me see. I don't know how much time I got, but the easiest way to answer this, from an educational standpoint, I got a bachelor's in clinical psychology, and then I got my master's in clinical mental health counseling, and then I started my licensure journey here in Virginia, and then so throughout that process, you had to get 4,000 hours total of counseling experience, face-to-face supervision. Just a collection of hours and data and research and stuff like that. So that is how it started from a educational standpoint, and then of course you got to take a test a national exam. You have to pass that. You have to do what is it? Internship hours. Let's see, you have to do practicum hours. So it's a collection of information that you has to do. And then of course, also depending on your degree program, you would have to do a different scenarios where you're actually doing therapy throughout the program. So it's a lot that is encompassed within the career side of it, of becoming a therapist, from school to experience to the practicum experience, hands-on experience, and stuff like that. But the pre-answer to your question is, so when I was younger, I was a ward of the state. My dad died when I was 5. My mom got sick when I was about 9 or 10. So my brother and sister and I wound up going to foster care, then group homes, stuff like that. And then, of course, being a ward of the state in Virginia at this time, therapy was mandatory. It was weekly sessions. And for me, I didn't.
Is that no longer mandatory?
I don't know.
Okay. I was just wondering.
I mean, at the time it was. Now I think it's probably it's probably different as far as how they go about that process. But for me, since it was mandatory, I didn't obtain as much as I could from it. One, the therapists were older white people. You know, I'm this young Black kid from the projects.
Yeah.
And then two, it just felt like a check in the box. It wasn't, to me, it wasn't an organic, cohesive process. You know, so for me, again, I didn't gain as much insight or skills, or just felt that it was a benefiting tool for me at that time. Fast forward, you know, I wound up emancipating myself at 16 years old. You know, lived, survived, graduated high school. Then I went to college. I went to HBCU, St. Paul's College. But being that I was emancipated, you know, at 16, so freshman year, sophomore year, it was still difficult because I was homeless. So what I do is sneak back. Like St. Paul's was a small HBCU, one male dorm, one woman dorm. So during the breaks, spring break, summer break, winter break, all those things, I would sneak back in the dorm. You know, I take up my foreman, I take up my microwave, my the small fridge, and set up shop while everybody else is at home. You know, and I decided I didn't want to do that no more. So sophomore year is when I joined the Army. So I did the Army 8 years, 2 deployments, one Iraq, one Afghanistan. And then within that process, you know, I knew I was different. I came back from those experiences with, you know, traumatic experience now, additional traumatic experiences. So I tried therapy again, and again, same results. It wasn't a cohesive process, and I didn't feel that it was beneficial to me at those times. And that's part of the reason too why a lot of veterans tend to go to the groups opposed to individual therapy or nothing at all. You know, so at that point, I just made the conscious decision to, yo, this might be something that you got to do, you know. So you got that experience as a young adolescent who was in the system, who had to go to therapy. You got that experience as a veteran, who somebody who needs therapy. You got that experience as a man who is reluctant to have therapy, you know. So I just checked a lot of boxes myself.
Yes.
And I was like, yo, you know what? If I do it, I'm gonna make it an experience. I'm gonna make it cohesive and collective and, you know, eclectic for people to want to go to therapy, because it can be a beneficial tool. So here we are.
I just got chills because there's so many things. I'm make sure I don't forget them. The first thing, well, your first experience of you explaining, you sitting with the therapist, and representation matters so much. So, and we're not saying white people, older, white, whatever, they need to be different. They lack connection. Like you said, it felt like they were just checking a box. And that makes sense. If they're there just to quote unquote do a fucking job, it's irritating and it's useless. It's not as effective. I don't want to say useless. It's not as effective as it could be. And it creates that stigma of therapy doesn't work, because my therapist is a white woman. And I'm able to still speak openly to her And if there was a Black woman, I would have spoken to her too. I knew I wanted to talk to a therapist. That's it. And she was the one who was available. And I made sure I knew what I wanted to talk about. So we'll get into that. The first thing, lacking connection. The second one, you seeing a need and you being you and be like, all right, I'm gonna create that shit. That's dope. And so many other people can take that on in different areas of their lives. Because I was going to ask you, did you know any therapists that look like you before you began?
Oh no. Therapy is still one of those taboo things. So I didn't personally know any Black male therapists, let alone Black therapists. I mean, I think just based on being in the system early, like I know a couple women who were social workers, but
Yeah.
even still, like working for the Department of Social Services doesn't mean that you have a degree in social work or therapy. So I can't say that I know. So it is a difference. But to go back to your statement earlier with the connection and stuff like that, like I mean, it's all about competency. So depending, but it's all about too the clientele and the population that you're working with. Like it's no reason why I don't see it being effective if I'm working with a older Asian lady. You know what I'm saying? Like it'll just be too much of a disconnect, whether it's culture,
Yep.
whether it's age, whether it's just life, in general. It's an entire different disconnect. Not that I wouldn't be effective in my skills or my delivery or my education, but just overall aurora. It might just be a difference in presentation. Not that I wouldn't do an effective job, or even back then, I wouldn't even say that the older white people that were my therapists didn't do an effective job. It just was a disconnect based on many other factors.
Do you think it's a factor of the lack of knowledge? Because that is true, because y'all are separated with different cultures, approaches, presentation, all of that. Could it still be effective if the other person was willing to learn, or they're already aware because they have taught themselves?
Yeah, so it can go a couple of different ways, but to like even the example with me uh doing therapy with an older Asian lady, like it'll just be easier and more effective to me to just refer to her somebody who is closely within that niche, opposed to me, like think about how much additional time and effort it would be for me to just try to understand from a cultural standpoint, or just trying to
That's real.
understand, one, I'm not a woman, two, I'm not Asian, I have limited knowledge on Asian culture. So it'll be doing a disservice to her to even try to cram that much information into a smaller segment, when I could just say, hey, you know what? Here's a couple referrals, that might fit you a little bit better. And not saying that every therapist would take that approach. That's just my approach, just because I want to be effective and I want to work with certain people, because I don't want people to say, I tried therapy and it didn't work. No, you tried a therapist and it wasn't, working for you. Because, like the entire field get blanketed based on those statements, especially with some people when it is based on a difference of culture or ethnicity or even gender at times. Like I'm a man. Like I've had a few males within. I'm not a therapist now, but they had women at first, and they said how much it was a disconnect, or they was embarrassed to disclose certain things.
That's
Um,
real.
so it wasn't as effective for them, but now it is, because they can freely express how they feel. Like just think about it. If you are a male and somebody highly attractive, like Holly Berry is your therapist, you're not gonna want to disclose to her that you having sexual issues or anger issues.
Yes.
You're gonna be embarrassed by just certain dialogue and certain topics. So you're not gonna be as freely open to disclose certain things. So that can stunt the process of therapy as well. Whereas you have a man, you can deliver it and it can be as impactful because one, he probably has similar experience, he probably got similar clients, he probably can articulate it in a way that you can comprehend it, and so many
Yeah.
different factors. Again, I'm not saying a woman wouldn't be able to do that, but just the
No,
connect
I follow. Yeah.
yeah, the connection between two people, I feel, wouldn't be as cohesive, or the rapport probably wouldn't be built as fast, just based on those things.
No, that's real. My previous career was in the medical field. I was an X-ray tech, and there's a procedure called a BE, a barium enema, where we insert this plastic tube in your rectum, and there's barium that is flooded through your large intestines to look for any strictures, anything like that. And as a student, I was actually completing my competency, and I was like, oh, there's an order for a BE. I'm going to do this patient. So that means going over the procedure, what to expect. It was a young male. I was probably late 20s. When did I start? Late 20s, maybe mid 20s. And he came in, he was undressed in the robe, maybe a year or two younger than me, with his Timbs on, socks. I'm literally explaining the procedure to him. And I'm like, I can't do this because I can visibly see him getting uncomfortable. And the procedure is needed, but I can get a comp with somebody else older who's done this multiple times. Like, I'm literally telling this Black man, I'm gonna stick this in your ass. Like, I was like, I can't do this. Now, some people would have read the room or not even read it, be like, I need this comp, so I'm gonna do it. Fucking yourself and the patient, because you want your patient to be a patient and be comfortable. That is the utmost important. So totally get it. And I ended up telling the tech, I was like, hey, I'm not going to do this exam. I can do it. I wanted to make sure they knew I wasn't trying to like just jump out of it. I was like, to protect him, I will run the images for you. So I did that
Yeah.
because I know exactly what you're talking about. I think I'm attractive. He was attractive. It was just weird. And I was like, I'm going to step out. So yeah, I definitely understand. I appreciate you putting that into perspective because I saw that you have one-on-one therapy available for people.
Yeah.
So
So
were you not offering that before? Like, tell me what happened.
no, well, I guess it depends on what you was viewing, but I do have,
Ah,
yeah, I do couples, I do individual, I do family, I do groups, I do, it men, women, children, different ethnicities. I do all of it. So I'm not sure what you was talking about when you said now. Um,
I think I just saw it posted and I was like, oh,
oh,
I don't
probably
know
because
why.
nah,
Go
you
ahead.
probably seen it because I'm taking more insurance now. At first, most of it was
Ah,
private pay. So if you seen a post saying that, it probably was introducing the different insurance companies that I'm taking now.
yes.
Yeah,
So how did that go about where you were doing private into insurance? What did that look like?
yeah. So it all depends. Matt, you talking about me specifically, or the
Mm-hmm,
process for
mm-hmm.
any therapist?
Talk about you and then you can do any other therapist as well.
Okay, so just from overall standpoint, to you can as a career field, you have the option to be self-pay and take insurance, and or a hybrid. You can do both. I do both. But it all depends too, because like my genre and my niche and I guess for me, it's more readily available for people who are already at that wit's end and say, yeah, I definitely want therapy. So a lot of my clients was like, yeah, I'm cool with doing self-pay. But also
Gotcha.
as somebody in a community where it's not a lot of access and availability, I want to be available to those who can't afford self-pay. So of course I take insurance. And then, the hybrid option is just beneficial. If somebody can afford it but don't want to, or can afford it but also have a job that's willing to pay, so you want to
Mm.
you want to have those options available, and it just diversify the attraction to your clientele base as well. So that process is of course marketing yourself for those different services, but when somebody is seeking out a therapist, they're going to look for that too. They're going to say, oh yeah, I can afford those sessions per whatever,
Yeah.
or yeah, I'm willing to use my insurance or EAP or whatever the case is. So
Oh, nice.
yeah, it's all beneficial. But like I said, of course, within our demographic here in Richmond, and my practice is on the bus line too. Like I said, I wanted to be able to reach
Come
everybody.
on.
So yeah, so in order to start taking insurances, of course, you got to submit to each and every panel, which can be a long, strenuous process. And then they got 90 to 180 days to let you in network. Yeah, it's a long,
Wow.
drawn out process, but again, it can be beneficial. But for me, like just being somebody who has a population on social media and within the community, like I'm just fortunate that a
Yes.
lot of people are self-paid, clients. But again, I want to be able to reach those people in those urban areas, and or the people who are much willing to just use insurance because they got it. So I have both.
And I don't know if this is a helpful question, so you tell me if it's helpful or not. What can someone expect to pay if they're paying private versus paying with their insurance?
Yeah, so it all depends. So the thing with insurance is the insurance will cover the bill or a portion of the bill. Then of course you'll have a copay, just like your regular doctor's
Doctor.
doctor visit. So I mean that would be determined by the insurance company. But as from a standpoint of self-pay, that varies too, depending on different people. I keep my prices reasonable, so it's 150 an hour individual, 200 for couples. Um, that's an hour session. That's 50 to 60 minutes. And then of course you can go down, you can do 45-minute sessions, and then of course your price will drop down to maybe 130, 120. It all depends. So again, it depends on the actual therapist and the practice. But also too, from a business standpoint, for the people who are out there who are planning to be clinicians or in school or
Mhm.
something like this, your rate determine can change with the insurance company reimburse you. So if your price is 150, but your contract with the insurance company is 130, then that's what the insurance company is gonna give you. Or if it's that contract is $102, they're gonna give you $102. So it all depends on the contractor
Gotcha.
side. Yeah.
Okay. That's helpful because I've had people ask the therapy location I go to, we go through our insurance and I pay $25 a session for an hour
Copay.
session.
Yeah, that's your copay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That means your
And
insurance cover the rest.
correct. And I don't know what the cost is. Like people have asked, I'm like, when I go for my insurance, that's how much I pay. I don't know how much it is. And insurance can be very confusing. And it's still um it doesn't have to be a deterrent. And especially when there's access to someone like you who's local. Some of the people that I talk to are local. So I'm happy to share that on here.
Yeah,
What does it
and,
look
and
like? Go
and
ahead.
before we move on from that too, like so doing your research on therapists is important too, on different therapists within your area. Because some therapists offer a sliding scale, which means if you can't afford it, they'll give you a reduced price and try to work with you. If you're a student or military or just somebody who is on a financial hardship, so just communicate that thing to the therapist, and or when you're doing your therapist research to find a therapist, try to get a consultation with them. Most therapists offer a 15-minute consultation session to where this is your time to grill them, ask as many questions as you want to ensure that it's going to be a good fit, and then price can be one of those questions that you ask.
Yeah.
So you can ask. I would encourage you to ask as many questions as you want. One, because you're paying for it, and then two, this is your life that you're trying to make change to. So ask them, have they ever worked with Black people? Have they ever worked with women? How do you feel about social issues? So ask those things just to make sure, because the last thing you want to do is sign up for therapy, and then you in this process again, and you feeling like, yo, I'm not being helped. This person is
Yeah.
clueless, or this person is not the therapist for me. So we don't want to dampen the entire field based on the disconnect between a specific therapist. And also, too, like, don't be afraid to branch out beyond the ones that your insurance company provide. So your insurance company is probably going to say, hey, these therapists are within your network. But then you look and you see like, oh, it's no men on the list, or it's no
Mm.
there's no African Americans on the list, or it's no, whatever demographic you're
Mm-hmm.
searching for, and go from there. So pretty much you can say, no, nah, I'm cool. I'm gonna look for somebody out of network, or I'm gonna look for somebody else, and and go from there. And then of course that therapist can then explain to you that process for taking you as a client who's out of network, or the self-pay option, or the sliding scale option, or whatever the other options there are.
I appreciate you circling back, because what I hear is basically people who are listening, it takes intention. It's not just like flipping through a book or online, like, all right, I'm gonna go with this therapist. Being intentional. Why do I want to see this therapist? And we can get into like what people actually ended up coming to you, speaking to you about, but why do I want to go? How much are they charging? Do they offer sliding scale? How often would I be seeing them? All of that. I love that you provided those questions for them to think about. What are some topics that you typically start with? Like, I've had people ask, what do you do when you're in therapy, Crystal?
Yeah, so I guess that question would depend on you. So for me, being a black male therapist with the movement, of course, naturally, a lot of wives are saying, "Hey, help my husband. Here he is." And of course, a lot of parents are saying, "Hey, here's my teen son. Do something with him." But it doesn't work like that for me. So I tell those people, it's two people that I can assist at this moment until they're ready. So there's somebody who doesn't see an issue with their options, or somebody who is not ready. So I don't want to be in therapy doing work for resistant clients. Like, yo,
Yeah.
just come back when you're ready, because right now you wasting a slot for somebody who actually is ready. And
Mm,
then two, for those parents or that spouse who's forcing their partner or child to get therapy and they're not ready, they're going to do it for you, but it's not really beneficial to them at that time. So you still going to be working against yourself. So now both of y'all are like, oh man, I'm paying all this money and it's not working. No, it's a frustrating process for somebody to feel like it's a chore, opposed to something that you want to enhance the areas of your life, whether that's the relationship with y'all or just them as an individual. So
yeah.
definitely feel free to wait for them, assist them in that process. But don't feel like it's going to be better if you drill them or make them want to get therapy, because some people don't move that way. Some people
Mm,
will much rather have other therapeutic options, whether that's journaling, exercises, lifestyle choices, stronger support system, and all those other things, opposed to saying, hey, go spend an hour talking to this person. Because of course it has to be a cohesive process. Rapport have to be built. Times have to be carved aside. Think about it. Like a lot of people within the older generation would much rather, like I did a series on my Instagram too on how different generations view therapy. The older generation, they don't really want to talk to nobody based on that. If you're not within, you're not within that circle,
mm-hmm.
you're not within that house, just based on, they're a generation or two removed from integration. So it wasn't a lot of black therapy options out there. So I'm not about to tell these white people my business. So that was the
Yep.
mindset. And then of course now that we continue to expand, we continue to be eclectic, we continue to see that there are other options. A lot of the people now will much rather be eclectic and do different things. Like people are now introduced to yoga,
Mm-hmm.
mindfulness. But this younger generation, this current generation, they're more eager to go to therapy because the options that are readily available for them. So it's definitely a shift.
It is. And the the fact that people, it's not funny, but it is funny, where people like, you have to go to therapy, like telling other people. It is, I understand it. And I also understand that you can't make anybody do anything they don't want to do. And like you said, it's not beneficial. Let's say they do go and they're sitting there, both of y'all just staring at each other like, well, this is a waste of time.
Yeah,
Um,
and when those things happen, like, bro, I'm getting paid regardless. You know what I mean?
yes.
Like, but I'd much rather get paid knowing that you are learning something, that you're introducing new things into your lifestyle that can not only help you, but vicariously help the people around you, you know?
Yeah.
So somebody referred you here for a reason. Somebody thinks that you can obtain value in this
Mm,
process. So why not give it a true shot?
that's real. And you mentioned, and I want to talk about it because I want to hear what your answer would be is don't do it unless you're ready. How does one know they're ready?
I mean, it would all depends on that person, to be honest with you, because ready for each person is different. Somebody could be ready because it can be on a situation to where, dang, man, multiple people came to me and told me I'm standoffish or I need to talk to somebody, or they're seeing a recurrence in these symptoms. Or it can be you as an individual identifying like, oh man, like I'm isolating. I'm not hanging with people no more. I'm not as vocal as I used to be. Or, um, I just want to fine tune where I am. I'm doing good. I want to make sure that I'm staying doing good. So it all depends on different people. It's no rule book to say, hey, you need therapy or you good. The identification, like as to be healed, is forever ongoing. Like it's no
Yeah.
destination to healing. So if you feel that you can benefit from or learn something new about yourself, about how you was raised or whatever, then give it a shot. Because think about it, a lot of people um were raised in trauma or grief, and they don't know that it's something different outside of it because they're numb and desensitized because this is all you know. Like just think
Yep.
about like for me, like I don't raise my voice, I don't use explicit language, I don't it's certain things I don't do. So I've ran into coworkers like, oh man, you know what I mean? Like, yo, I'm not gonna be combative with you, just on the strength of one,
Yeah.
we're in a work environment, and then two, like, I don't have to talk to you like that in order for you to understand my point. But for them, being raised in that cantankerous environment or being argumentative mean, so now they looking like,
Hmm.
oh man, like so everybody don't argue or everybody's not combative. Like, nah, bro, what I mean? We at work. Like we
Yes.
just had a difference of opinion. That doesn't mean that we gotta argue or fight or whatever. So, those examples happen all the time. Or either relationship examples. There's a lot of couples that's like that too, that were raised different, and or are seeking something different based on the void that they had within childhood, so they can
Yeah.
have attachment style issues or not knowing the effective parenting style. So, it all depends on where you are within the scope or the spectrum of why you want to get change or why you want to ensure that you can continue being on a good path.
And it's fitting because in my therapy session, we could talk about a host of things that are going on now currently and things that have gone on when I was growing up. And you talk about relationships and growing up in the household. I thought an example of love was cussing, yelling at each other, getting mad, being possessive. And when I started dating my husband, when we first started dating, he wasn't like that. And I was like, he don't like me like that. And I was like, yo, what in the hell? I think that's love. And I didn't realize because my ex was like that, like my parents, yelling, arguing at the top of their lungs. And then I don't know if they talked about whatever they were arguing about, but they didn't show us that they had come to an agreement or apologized or whatever. And then the next day they were good. And I thought that was normal. And it's so right on point of there's nothing wrong with how we all grew up. However, it has caused some shifts or avoidance or behaviors that are not beneficial for us. And a lot of people don't know that. Even I know someone, when they were talking to their therapist, just telling a story, they were growing up in the city and was talking about they seen somebody get like stabbed on the bus as a kid and blah, blah, blah. And just kept talking. The therapist was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Stop. What? You checked. There was nothing like you didn't have any traumatic issues come or events come up when you were growing up. They didn't see that as trauma.
Yeah, but that's the thing too. That is traumatic, but again, they became numb and desensitized to it, thinking that it was
Mm-hmm.
normal.
Yeah.
And until you leave your environment or until you get around different people, you don't know. You just thinking like, oh, this is how life is. But
Mm-hmm.
who knows? It's a difference in everything. I've been fortunate enough to go to about maybe 16 different countries. And I learn something new each time because, the world is not as small as we think it is. Like,
Yeah.
even those smaller examples, just from neighborhood to neighborhood,
Facts.
or next door living with somebody, you raised in one house a certain way. You go to your aunt house is a different way. You know what I mean? In my house, you
Yep.
keep your shoes on, walk through the house. At your aunt house, nah, you take your shoes off, don't do, so you don't know it's a difference. And then so you're learning and you are forever growing. So don't stop growing. So that's the same thing with therapy too. But the benefit of it is, or the education piece behind it is, you're learning those different modalities of how life can be, or dang, like I didn't know that it was a difference. Even with your relationship, your example of your relationship with your ex, like that was raised similar to how he was raised. So again, your next relationship, you thinking like, oh no, nah, this ain't love. He don't care enough.
No. Yeah.
But again, like he was raised in a different environment to where it's okay to have communication and be effective without being, loud and boisterous and so it all depends on where you are.
Facts. And I'm gonna get into some of the questions that people had shared that I
Sure.
asked them to share. So thank y'all for sharing it. Some of it you've already answered. What poses the largest barrier to men seeking mental health services?
I mean, I think there's a couple of different barriers. One, yeah, access and availability. So a lot of men will probably be more comfortable if they knew that it was a male therapist out there, closer to them within age, ethnicity, and so many other factors. So access and availability is definitely one. And then two, I think a lot of men are stuck in their own ways with the stubbornness and not knowing to expand their mind. Like I had a couple of professional athletes, and I had, just a wide range of men. But what I mean, stuck in their ways or just having that mindset is they don't know a lot of the diagnoses are not gender based. Like, you as a human
Mm,
experience these things like trauma and depression and, even grief. So even if we took those examples, like I've had, like I said, big athletes say, man, I had 12 tackles the other day. I ain't depressed. That's for cheerleaders. Or I ain't going through no grief. I seen people die before. Da, da, da. So not knowing that, yo, it's a
mm.
human quality. It's not specific a gender quality. So now that we know what it is, we can treat it. We can learn ways to cope. We can identify these things to prevent them. So that part, I think those two things. So access and availability, and then just the stubbornness of not knowing that those are human qualities opposed to specific gender. Because for a long time, people thought therapy was for women. And Hollywood doesn't do a good example of having healthy men therapeutic relationships. Think about like if you see depression in the movies, it's a small white woman on the couch eating a tub of ice cream or something. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't really speak to that overbearing male who is going through some things and then like, yo, I just need to process what's going on. You know what I mean? Like I don't know
Mm-hmm.
any positive examples of that. So people just realistically, people just think like, oh, this is what depression is. I'm not sitting in
Yeah.
a dark room crying, so I'm not depressed. No, it's other factors to that. Or people just think too, like, oh, that didn't happen to me. I'm not going through trauma. It's other factors to that. And there's so many other things too.
It's so real. And it goes back to we don't realize how much we absorb from what we see on TV. And like just identify that's what that is now. That's it. Instead of what we're doing more now is talking about it, like me talking to my friends about therapy, you having this large platform on Instagram, YouTube, your book, we're gonna get into that as well. Your game, acknowledging like TV, entertainment, but then connection with real people in real life. can give you a broader spectrum of what this human experience is. So that's real. How do you feel about apps like BetterHealth that solicit the help of mental health professionals?
Um, I mean, I have my personal biases. One, as an entrepreneur with a growing practice, and a lot of other entrepreneurs with growing practices are my friends. So I would discourage people from using uh, those apps based on not only that reason, but two, the logical reasons are the ethical implications of those apps and the safety and protection of the people. Because think about it, many people who own those platforms aren't therapists. It's more of a business model for them. So the ethics aren't there. It's a lot of it, to me, it can do a lot of damage and hurt a lot of people. And that's why most of those apps be having lawsuits and things like that. However, they have more money to be able to get radio commercials and
Yeah.
ads and so many other spots because it's a solid business model, but from the standpoint of health and protection and actually helping, it's not a model that I would encourage people to use.
Thank you for that. Because I always wondered about that. Like, is this helping? I never thought about the people who own the app not being there. Like, that is,
No, think about it. You got $100 million. Like um, people gonna die every day. I'm gonna get me a funeral home. I don't know anything about cremation. I don't know anything about, you know what I mean? Like the
yeah.
burial process. I just got this money. I know people gonna die every day. So that's similar to what a lot of, I ain't gonna say all of them, but it's the majority of them are within that spectrum. Oh, I got this collection of money. Oh, this is going on in the world. People gonna need therapy. Let me start something. And that's how
Mm,
a couple of them did start, just based on the fact that, not saying that all of the intentions were not
correct.
as pure.
Mhm.
I'm just saying, I'm speaking to it as from a standpoint of their intentions and their motto is different than my intentions and my fellow colleagues who are practicing from the standpoint of we got the experience, we got the education, we put in the work to get licensed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now we are in competition with somebody who doesn't care, somebody in another state who, you know what I mean, just
Yeah.
had access to funding and created a model that people are looking to. Again, like I encourage people to get help where they can, but also do the research behind those things, because all of it is not safe and all of it is not ethical. So you don't want to put
Yeah.
yourself in a position to where you at risk, or you're being taken advantage of, or you're just not in a position to get the help and service that you need.
And this goes back to what you had shared earlier about doing your research. And I thank you for giving us all these different perspectives of how to go about it, giving examples of it as well, because it reminds me when I was in the hospital, there was this older white lady who came in and got, I believe it was a chest x-ray. And I was just walking her out to show her where she needed to go to the parking lot. And I was like, we'll send the results to your doctor. The radiologist will read it. And she was like, I don't think it's my lungs. I think it's something else. And I was like, okay, did you tell your doctor? Yeah, but he thinks I should do this. And I was like, you can always get a second opinion. She looked at me and was like, I've been with him for 50 years. I'm not going to go anywhere. And I was like, that is her choice. However, as the patient, you have choices. As the person who is seeking a therapist, you have choices. You asking your therapist or potential therapist all these questions is for your benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Who cares if they get mad or irritated? That's not someone you want to work with. Thank you for showing me you're an asshole. Next, you have so much power as the seeker. And just like previous episode, we're talking about interviewing for a job. You have the power. Do I actually want to work here instead of feeling like I need to prove myself and be worthy to take this position? Are you a good listener? Do you actually encourage learning? How's the culture here? You have the power. So all of these things, James, are very helpful for people to have and recognize their power when they are ready. So thank
Yeah,
you for that.
no problem.
What would a perfect mental health support system look like? for millennials, Black people, Black men?
It all depends too. Ideally, you want your circle to be ones who hold you accountable. But also with that accountability, if you're not ready to hear what they got to say, then you're gonna be met with resistance, and then it's an argument, and then it can come other things. So what I tell people to do is ensure that your safety is intact. And I say this to a lot of women, those wives or spouses who force their husbands, or those parents who force their kids. Like, make sure that you're safe, not just from a physical standpoint of domestic violence, but from emotional standpoint too, because you don't want to you don't want to be emotionally drained by trying to assist somebody and they're not taking the hints, or they're not trying to um get what you're trying to relay. So make sure you're safe. Make sure your emotions, I'm not saying wash your hands immediately. I told you to get help. You ain't get it. Don't worry about me no more. But what I'm saying is, hey, I did my part. You got to travel this road on your own. Hopefully you get the assistance that you need. I'm going to support you, but I'm not going to be at the mercy of you disrespecting me, or crossing my boundaries based on the lack of attention and support and accountability that you're having. So I would say just make sure that you are listening to your support circle, because those people around you are the people that you're probably injuring without even knowing it, if you're not getting help that you need. So if there's a chapter in my book called Displacement. So displacement happens a lot more frequently in relationships. So just think about it. Like, you at work, you mad, the boss made you mad, coworkers pissing you off. You can't fire off at your boss or yell at your coworkers, because you've been HR, you might get suspended, you might even get terminated. However, that displacement happened when you go home and you hear the kids playing with toys, like, why y'all making all that noise? Da, da, da. Or you heard that your partner in there cooking, and why you banging the pot so loud? I don't want to eat that. Like, yo, that anger is not for them. The anger was for earlier when you couldn't do that to your boss or whatever. So that's the placement. So we got to ensure that we are checking that. So again, we're not injuring or hurting people who actually care for us.
Thank you so much for saying that, because this podcast is designed to raise the awareness. And that example there, and many others you shared earlier, is the realest shit ever. When I left my corporate job, I wasn't aware, this was back in 2019, I wasn't aware how I was reacting. And it was more of me feeling more down, sad when I got home, because at work, I was trying to express myself. I was trying to get out there and actually make it better, improve it, just to be shot down and just to come home and just be like, I don't want to do anything. And my husband seeing that, basically saying, like, years later, I asked him, he was like, you seem like a shell of a person, like you weren't Crystal anymore. And when he said it, it was like a punch to the stomach. Like, someone who loves me sees me kind of deteriorating and be like, I don't fucking know what to do. Like, that's real. Talk more about your book. I know you have it everywhere, so shout out to you. It's Walmart, Amazon. When did you first have it, and what does it look like? If someone were to purchase it, what could they expect to get from it?
Yeah. So the book is called Man, Just Express Yourself. It's an interactive planning guide for boys and men to better express themselves. So it just came from the perspective of me seeing not only boys, but grown adult men having difficulty with tough conversations, or, being able to articulate what they actually feel. So for me, I always say and display feel your feelings, so it's a wide range of feelings, but oftentimes boys and men only, you display a couple of them, which is happy, you sad, or you angry.
Yep. Yep.
It's so many other ones in between those. So the book, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Target, Walmart, pretty much anywhere books are sold, and it's over 65 different topics: trauma, grief, displacement, peer pressure, resentment, pride, just so many different things in which men normally talk about with other men, but the other people in your life need to know that. Your partner need to know this. Your parent need to know this, or your other loved ones or your coworkers or your teammates. So it's just beneficial to people to do these things, affirmations. It's a review on my Amazon or Goodreads from a lady who was married 45 years.
Mm,
Yeah, so listen, I'm 36 and she's been married 45 years. But her review said, "This is the most my husband and I ever talked about feelings."
mm,
So what she did was she purchased the book. I encouraged her to highlight a couple different chapters that she wanted her husband to do, and then they discussed it over dinner and date night. So naturally, she highlighted, the trauma section, the grief section, um, a couple other ones, but just processing it with him, it didn't feel like a chore. It felt like something to, one, allow his partner in, and then two, it felt like something to enhance our relationship, opposed to just, hey, do this and give it back, or why you act like that, So
mm.
long anyway, they wind up discussing it, but she learned like, oh, some of the ways that you are is based on things that happen to you, throughout your life. I had no idea, because realistically, if you walk up to somebody or if you're in a relationship with somebody, you
Yeah,
typically
you know.
you just don't ask like, has
No.
has this ever happened to you, or why you act like that, because they might not know. But if, of course,
Correct.
you give them
Yes.
the book and they start, uncovering, or be like, yo, you know what, this did happen. Because trauma is one of them things that can be repressed up until it happens again. And if you don't address it or process it, you can wind up manifesting itself when you are least expected. So it can be in your next relationship or at your next job or in the community. So those are some of the reasons why the book has been effective. And of course, parents with those stubborn teen sons who think they know it all, or out here getting influences from the wrong people or
Yeah.
direction, it's been a beneficial tool for them as well. So I've just been fortunate that a lot of people are grabbing onto it. A lot of men's groups, a lot of women's groups. A lot of women are supporters and proponents of it because, again, they got men in their lives. They got sons, they got brothers, they got fathers, they got husbands. So many different factors. So it's been moving. It's been helpful based on those things.
I'm so glad you gave the example because I was going to ask how would one use it, and that's a beautiful example of how you could use it
Yeah, yeah.
with that
So
woman and her husband.
yeah, so it's you got two options. You can write out your answer or you can draw out your answer. So it's a page for each. So the younger people tend to be a little bit more creative and draw different scripts. But I've also had a lot of adults, men, draw different scripts as well. And we process those things, or they process them with the people within their lives. Because again, articulation might, like verbal articulation might not be there. Hey, I'm sad
Yeah.
because, but if you sit down and you write why you're sad, or you draw why you're sad, you can learn something within those things. So that's how you do it and how it's been effective.
I appreciate you sharing that because I could actually use that with my male clients. Right. Currently, I have female clients, and I know what you're telling me because I have an assignment that I have my clients do where they write it out. And to have something that could prompt them and make our sessions beneficial just as a coach to a client, done. So in that, could you mention something they discuss over dinner and something they could do for like date night? I'm a transition to the cheesy dates.
Yeah.
So many questions, and I know we're coming up on time. Where did the idea come from?
Yeah, yeah. So Cheesy Dates is a board game that I created during the pandemic, but it stemmed from my idea, like just, like I've always been an old soul, I guess, right? So in high school or during that dating phase when my peers was courting girls, they wanted to go to, you going to parties, you going to different stuff. But for me, I'm like, yo, let's hit this museum, or let's hit, let's hit the park, let's do whatever. And they like, nah, that's cheesy. I ain't doing that. I'm trying to hit this spot. So I just kept
Um,
that theme. But now as a therapist who are doing marriage counseling with couples, and or who always see posts to say, hey, what are some good date night ideas? This how this idea came about. So it's an 18 by 18 board deck. You got different pawn pieces. You got two dice. You got two different card decks. One card deck is a calendar card deck, which is different date ideas because sometimes people run low on spontaneity. You get tired of the
Yeah.
parties, the clubs, or the movies. You want to do other things. So it's over 45 different date ideas that you can do anywhere. Some are home, some out in the community. And then the next card deck is just different questions that couples should ask and or people should ask because you can play this with your girls, your date nights, your game nights. You can play this with different couples. So that card deck is just comprised of different questions, whether it's intimacy, whether it's finances, whether it's social issues, whether it's just communication between you and the group. So what you'll do, of course, roll the dice, move around the board. You'll land on one of the two card options, and then from there you ask the question. So if you're playing with a group, you ask the question to the group, get different perspective. If you're playing with your partner, you ask your partner the question, get their perspective. And so some of the things that again, all of these came from me doing marriage sessions, right? So a quick example before you go is like I've had this couple, they was married at the time, they was married 5 years, they had 3 kids. But anyway, the husband put the wife through her bachelor's, boom, got her bachelor's. Now she's making 80 plus thousand a year. So he said, "Hey, hon, listen, I want to take 6 months off. You good now? You can hold us down for 6 months. I want to get this HVAC tech, then I can start a business." Da da da. Again, 5 years of marriage, 3 kids. Her response was, "I'm not taking care of no grown man." So listen. So from a
Wait a
perspective,
minute.
yeah,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah. So at that point, it was just tough. Like, think about it. Like, not only this is the father of your children, not only y'all been married through thick and thin, but just the decency of, hey, you know what? You put me through school. I'll return that. So none of those factors weighed into her. Just the societal factors of women ain't supposed to take it. So to me, that was a lot of different damaging examples. So I got a lot of different questions in there, just based on, again, real scenarios that happened within therapy. And even if you look back to last year around April when the Roe v. Wade was overturned, some of the social issues a lot of couples had difficulty with, or in your peer groups, it's a handful of people like, nah, yeah, I'm glad they overturned it. Or like, yo, why are you making a choice for women's bodies or whatever?
Yeah.
So just disconnect within those things. So it's a good way to assist with communication. Again, intimacy questions, because sometimes people grow apart or grow at different paces. So the game is a good, fun way to get back to those things. And or you might just have this burning desire to ask this question, but is in fear of what the person might say. So now you can put it on the game. Oh man,
Yes.
this is my question. So
And don't try to like mix up the questions to put it on top and try to make other people answer it either. Don't do it the sneaky way. Me and my husband played it and I didn't know what to expect. I read the back and I was like, I want to play it before I interview you. And it was so much fun because it gave us, like, me and my husband have always talked about random stuff. Even when we talked about our childhood, he knew about how I grew up. I knew how you grew up. That's just the way it was. But still answering these questions gave us a different perspective because it would be a question I wouldn't have asked, just didn't think about it. The
yeah.
biggest one is, why do you want to get married? We're already married, obviously. But for me, it was like you said, it's hard to articulate or write out your words and picture. It's more of a feeling for me in the terms of how our marriage have grown. Ideally, like I should say initially, getting married to me was like, we've been together for a while. We like each other. Now we're supposed to get married.
Yeah. Not only that, just think about it. Like, look how many couples out there who are not satisfied sexually, but just have difficulty saying like,
yes,
like, yo, I want to do this or I want to experience that. Not even from a standpoint of introducing somebody else to the bedroom or introducing toys or, hey, I just need you to touch me here more. So some of those difficult questions, I'm telling you, can be found within this game, and it'll be beneficial to you to do those things.
People don't understand how much they're missing out. And again, me and my husband have always been open and talked about that. Do a little bit more of this, do that. Even in the moment, we just been open. And I know we're blessed and I know we're unicorns. I get it, but I want other people to experience that as well.
Yeah.
And this game is easy enough. It's fun, especially the date ideas. Like one of it, I'm not going to say all of it, but I am going to share my favorite. It was like build a fort in the living room. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
hell yeah. Like me and my sister used to do that growing up. So it's such a breath of fresh air and it's easy. And I like that we could do it with couples. And I know there's only 4 pawns, but even if each couple get their own pawn, then you can have 8 people play.
Yeah. Yeah. Nah, it's a couple different ways that you can play it. So again, like I'm just fortunate that it works that way. So it's definitely beneficial to a lot of people. So hopefully, people reach out and people
How
figure
do we give
out,
away? Because I have an extra one that you
oh yeah,
had,
there you go. Yeah.
and I need to figure out a way how to give it out to the listener. Because thank you for that suggestion. That was genius. James was like, buy one for yourself and buy one for a listener. I was like, done. Thank you for that. I really, really, really appreciate that.
Yeah,
Um,
nah, cool. I definitely appreciate it.
but before we go, don't let me forget, you have an event coming up in March. So tell me more about that before we wrap.
Yeah. So, I pre-pandemic, I was doing a lot of different groups, whether they were for men or for first-time home buying, restoration of rights, LGBTQ, what else, voter registration, just so many different things. But coming in March and then a couple more months throughout the rest of the year, I'll be doing seminars for husbands or fathers, really. So just fatherhood seminars. So blended families, navigating the courts, just so many different things that fathers probably need that didn't have access to. You just winging it. The co-parenting situation, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
just that trauma or that stress of being and going to court and having a co-parent can be stressful to a lot of men, and a lot of men deal with it. So, that's one of the a couple different seminars that I'll be doing.
And will the seminar be like Zoom days,
Nah, that'll be
Instagram?
in person at the Healing Hub.
Okay.
Yep,
Nice.
my spot. And I already got the flyer, but I just need to create the Eventbrite link.
Okay.
The first one is actually March 13th from 11 to 1. And that's I'll be discussing the bonus child, which means you blended family, you marrying a partner, you got a child, they got a child, how y'all making this work. Or vice versa, because it can go both ways. The partner might embrace you and warm up to you, but the child can be different, or the two children might not get along. So those are some of the things that we'll be discussing because it's needed.
That's so dope. It definitely is needed. And you are so personable, but also experienced. So I know whoever does attend will benefit from it and you will learn from them as well. And that's the beauty of these in-person, virtual, whatever connections that we create.
Yeah.
We're all learning from each other.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be dope. So James, before we wrap, how would you like people to find you, link up with you? What's your best method? Because you're everywhere, which is dope as shit. But yeah.
I think the easiest way to find me is the website, www.mentoheal.com, www.mentoheal.com. And from there, of course, the book is there, the merch is there, the board game is there, my social media is there, my YouTube channel is there. And it's also a resource list for people who are seeking therapists and or hotlines, whether that's the crisis hotline or homeless hotline or domestic violence hotline. All of those resources are on the website as well.
And I'll link those, your website and also the resource list in the show notes today. Cannot say it enough. I thank you, James. It's been a pleasure. I've learned a lot and I look forward to sharing more of your work and everything else that you have out there with other people. So thank you.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I definitely appreciate you extending your platform to me, and I'm glad that your patrons will have knowledge or increase in knowledge that they already possess. So I appreciate you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome.